And I'll tell you that Nigeria's Labour Party has refuted claims by the presidency that its presidential candidate, Peter Obi, and his supporters are behind the planned nationwide anti-government protest scheduled for August 1. The presidency described the calls for protests under the hashtags Tinubu Must Go and Revolution 2024 as treasonable. In a lengthy tweet published on his X account on Saturday, the special advisor to the president on information and strategy, Bayo Onanuga, accused Peter Obi and his supporters of spreading the hashtags, alleging that they are not Democrats but anarchists. Onanuga, however, proposed a Save Nigeria rally from August 1 to 15, 2024, in response to the planned nationwide protests from August 1 to 10 against the rising cost of living and economic hardship. He claimed that those organizing the protests were also behind the EndSARS protests of October 2020, which later turned violent. And joining us on the news to discuss this is Chukwuma Okenwa, a political analyst, and he will be sharing his thoughts on this. Thank you so much, Mr. Okenwa, for joining us.
You're welcome.
So first, what do you make of the presidency's allegation singling out Peter Obi and his supporters as sponsors of the scheduled protest for August, even going ahead to even calling it a treasonable offense? What do you make of that statement?
I think at best that could be described as baseless, considering the fact that the evidence suggests otherwise, because never at any point did we see Mr. Peter Obi calling for maybe the overthrow of the government or even for protest. Even when he had good grounds, when he was still expecting for the needful to be done after the elections, hopefully that the courts would deliver justice, maybe in his own context. But that didn't happen, and just the very fact, okay, so that that result was announced, and a lot of his supporters felt like, oh, let's take to the streets. And protest that INEC did not actually follow its guidelines. But he was the one that even addressed his followers and said, protest is not the way to go. You know, let's follow these things legally, and we saw that play out. And even up to the part when the Supreme Court gave justice, there was none of such things like motioning his followers to protest. So for someone to come out of the blues to suggest that a man who visibly could not be fingered in any way to connect his strategy to link up with protest would best be described as baseless.
Okay. Well, we know that protest is the civic right of any citizen in any country all over the world. It's actually backed by international laws. So why does it seem as though this administration and the ruling parties are averse to protests and open criticism, owing to the fact that they actually rode on that momentum to get into power?
Well, let me say something very important, because I really think that what the presidency did is a very smart one. To identify two of the hashtags that indeed are treasonable, and leaving aside the major issue, which is the end bad governance protest. Of course, for anybody to start calling for that a president that was duly elected democratically should go without actually following the law is treasonable, number one. And also, like, calling for a revolution is also treasonable, because there's not a such thing like a bloodless revolution. But of course, the Constitution in a democracy provides for protest, and hence is peaceful, citizens are not armed, and the police should be able to provide the needed protection. And that is what Bayo Onanuga need to appreciate, that what largely more Nigerians are calling for, it's the presidency should look into issues around hunger, issues around the perils of the citizens, and not to leave those issues and begin to make it more political, you know, by looking at other hashtags like Tinubu Must Go. I think what is resoundingly across Nigeria is that there is a need to end bad governance, and it is within the civil rights of the citizens to demand for such.
Okay, so Chukwuma, let me play the devil's advocate here. Now, we see a government has actually distributed food palliatives, though states are yet to register reception. The House of Reps has actually slashed the salaries by 50%. We know that, of course, the Nigerian government has actually approved 70,000 as minimum wage. The CNG vehicles and, of course, conversion has been rolled out. Loans are being given to students, and an appreciable amount is added to the reserve, the cash reserve, the foreign reserve of the country. And the government is saying that there are lots more policies coming to bed that will actually cushion the effects of the policies of government over time. Now, aren't these enough to actually placate those who feel aggrieved by how this government has administered over the country? Maybe they should even come to table to dialogue with this government rather than take to the streets. What do you think?
Certainly not enough, because when you look at the microeconomic indices, the consequence upon the policies of the current administration, which have led to loss of jobs, movement of investors out of Nigeria, and even like the threatening of some local investors, like we see the politics that is playing around the Dangote refinery, which is not healthy for an economy that is actually trying to survive. I mean, the Naira keeps collapsing, and even like once in a while interventions, like we see from the government, of trying to pound the funding side, more like the Dutch disease, right? Where you have like free flow of dollars, and then its long-term implication is also to lead to further devaluation of Naira. Yes, things like that has not led to. So what Nigerians are actually demanding for is sustainable policies. If you distribute rice, for instance, how long is that going to last? How many Nigerians will that get? Is that really going to end the hunger that Nigerians are agitating for? Certainly not. Civil servants are also less than 1% of the population. So you increase the salary of them. What about policies that you did that have made it very difficult for the average Nigerian to put food on the table? How are you going to contain that? How are you going to manage the inflationary rates? So I really think that some of those policies that gets to the welfare of the common man has not been addressed by this current administration. And you cannot be considering any other thing as good enough to mitigate the agitation that currently we see, uprising from the citizens. And also, like one of the legislators, I mean, if you cut down salaries without touching the allowances, how much is the salaries? The major problem is actually with the allowances, and Nigerians are very clear on their demands.
Okay, Chukwuma Okenwa, political analyst, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.